Okay, good afternoon. You know, one of the best things about working for an open source software company is the amount of collaboration that we see between the folks at Alfresco, our community, our partners, and our customers. And it's always a treat when we get two of those together to co-present. So with us today, we have Luis Cabaciera and PJ from Alfresco and Ty, respectively, here to present on the Apache project, ManifoldCF and output connectors for migrations.
Yeah, so welcome to the talk, everybody. Thanks for joining. Let's have a look of how our presentation is organized. First, I'm going to speak. We are going to do a brief overview on the Apache Manifold, and then we are going to speak about the two new output connectors and the new paradigm that we brought into Manifold that will allow us to do content migrations. So I am Luis, as Nathan says. I'm a solution architect for Alfresco. I've been in Alfresco in 5 years. I have a couple of certifications from Alfresco, and I'm a recent committer on the Apache Manifold project. At my left side is the great PJ. He's from Thai, a strategic partner of Alfresco, and he's a very active member of our community and participates and is a committer on several different open source projects. So, and that's why he got this very nice award from the Order of the Bee. He is so happy bragging about this all the time, so he deserves it. Put your hand together for Piergiorgio. And without further ado, I'll pass the presentation to him. He's going to do a brief overview of Manifold.
Thank you. Just some main concepts about the framework, the core framework of Manifold, to let you, know about some cool features that we have added now. So ManifoldCF is a repository crawler, and the main goal of the project, so the project was born for crawling repositories, so content repositories such as Documentum, Alfresco, SharePoint, and managing the indexing process against search servers such as Solar, OpenSearch, and so on. So this is the main goal of the project, so we have extended this framework. But we have to know some main concepts to extend the framework. So we have the crawling process, so it's a concept that means that we are getting some contents from source repositories, and we would like to control this process so in an incremental way. We have some repository connection. The repository connection will take care about the content on our source repositories, so that are very important for us. The output connection are related to take care about migrating this content or indexing this content against search servers. So the latest addition that we have done recently is related on the content repositories or content migration. So not only control the indexing process, but the content migration itself. We have also an authority connection that we could use to, let developers and applications to check access tokens for each content. So you don't need to migrate also ACL, but you can query the ManifoldCF database to understand if some content can be accessible to some users or groups. We have transformation connection, so you can build your own pipeline on Manifold, and during the crawling process, so you can create your pipeline with different transformation connectors that allows you to do something similar to an ETL process on content repositories. So it is very important.
Yeah, on this part of the transformation connection, it's very important to look at the possibilities these have in terms of a migration perspective. Because we are migrating content into a target repository, we can take advantage of the transformation connection to enrich our content while we are migrating. Think about files in a file system that they live there as binary files. If you want to enrich them with metadata, we can use the transformation connection to add metadata to these files and enrich our content part of the digital transformation as a content that has no life and can become a living content, part of a workflow process and all. So we can enrich the content with the transformation connection.
We have also a notification connection. This concept allows us to integrate Manifold with some messaging systems such as Slack to check if some jobs is ended correctly or some eventual errors can appear during the process. So it's very important to have an integrator. So ManifoldCF is built on a pluggable architecture, so you can build new components very easily, such as in Alfresco we have behaviors, actions, or web scripts, for example. So the core framework is built in this way, in the same way. And we also can use the status reports to check the current contents that we are processing during the crawling, but we also have an history report, so we can take a look at all the past processes. So we can create some reports, making some queries against the database of Manifold, and the UI is ready to show all these things. So you just only need to use it. So we have new features here. And Manifold have some improvements recently. So we have a new user interface. And the most important thing that we would like to underline here is that you can configure easily from a user interface, and the process is an incremental process. So you don't need to take care about the past.
Yes, what Piergiorgio, let me just contextual PJ is saying, let me just contextualize a little bit what he means about the incremental crawling. Incremental crawling, this concept means that when we have a crawler that has already crawled the source repository or different sources repository, the next time we crawl, because Manifold has its own database, it records all the crawling activity, meaning the next time the crawling will happen, it will only crawl for the differences and the deltas.
So what you can do with Manifold, so you can, execute some jobs on demand directly using the user interface, or can schedule. So you can run your jobs during the night, and at the morning you can find the content correctly migrated or indexed as you wish. It depends on your use case in the repository. So you can configure your content repositories connections, your search server connections. If you have Solr, OpenSearch, or you have an enterprise search platform, you can build and you can drop new contents using directly Manifold. You can configure your transformations. And also you can take a look at the history for creating reports that you probably do that. So you have to create some reports sometimes for the compliance department of your customer. But now you can configure, because this is the new work that we are doing during the last year, together with also Luis, for configuring your content repositories as the output of the framework. So you just configure your connector, and Manifold will migrate contents using the same scheduling architecture. So now this new Swerve is born from a community discussion, because in Apache you can do everything, but before that you have some kind of common consensus in the community, and we have done this together with Rafa Aro and Carl Blythe, that are the other two persons that were very interested in this last year, and Luis has joined us to helping us in extend the platform from many sides, and starting from Alfresco.
Yeah. So yeah, this part of the content migration, historically Manifold has evolved as a crawler system with several repository connections, and these connectors will output historically to a search engine, either Solr, Elasticsearch, or all the existing output connectors were related to search and indexing the content. This new paradigm that we are introducing now, the output connectors can also write to target repositories, not just the binary content, but also the metadata. So this is a brief overview. On the left side, you see all the input connectors we have already available that evolved with the Manifold project. This is now a mature project. Although it was built in an open source community, it has years of development. It has stable input connectors. So when we started to build this concept of output connectors for content as a migration utility, we are already leveraging all the input connectors that exist. So we don't need to touch that code. So we can just reuse all the input connectors, and we need only to take care how do we output this content into the repository so that we can look at Manifold not just as a crawler that is spitting content into search indexes, but also as a migration tool that can actually migrate content from these several repositories into target repositories. And in the reality of the companies these days is the content is spread all over. Companies started with shared folders. They have some Documentum repositories. They can have SharePoint. They can have content spread all across the company. But with this set of input connectors, you can think about centralizing all your content in a repository that you can use as your main repository for the enterprise content. So that's our goal. So I'll pass it to PJ.
Yes.
For the
Thank
demo
you.
of the seamless
So
output connector.
this is just a video showing you how to configure and how to migrate some contents from a generic CMIS repositories to Alfresco using ManifoldCF. So this is an example of the configuration from the output connection side. So using the ManifoldCF user interface, you just need to configure the endpoint with the user that can access writing permission against the target repository. And this is an example of how to configure an Alfresco as a target repository. We want to migrate to Alfresco our content. And we only need to set the endpoint and a CMIS query where we can identify the target folder related to this drop zone, so for our drop zone. So we are migrating content over there. We have also the create timestamp tree. So if we don't have a smart tree for our repository, the output connector will create the tree for you, considering a timestamp structure, so using the year, month, and the day automatically, considering the creation date of the content. So this can do for you automatically the output connector. So let's start the video. So considering to have a CMIS repository, generic CMIS repository with some assets. So we are considering, during this demo, some MAME resources from the, if you are a video gamer, probably you know very well these type of assets. So we have different type of assets. So we have images, videos, we have some movies, and we have also soundtracks. So this is an icon. So in this generic CMIS repository, we can have PDF files. These are real assets. So that's why we want to show you that are real assets. So we are going to migrate this content against an Alfresco repository using Manifold. So this is screenshots of our assets. And when you work on a digital assets management project, you probably need to manage different MIME types for your content. And you probably need to write in code, some code that take care about migrations, MIME types, and so on. This is a real file audio. So we have also the soundtracks for some video games here. We have a lot of contents, and we have also videos. So this is just an example of a potential digital assets management project that you typically could find in the market. And actually, we are going to configure our manifold. But before that, we show you that we have an Alfresco running that is our target repository that is empty, ready to receive new contents on the 8080 port. We have a target repo folder, smart folder. This is a space. And now we are going to configure Manifold from scratch. So this is exactly what you have to do to migrate content using the user interface of Manifold. So we need to access the application, and we are starting to configure the repository connection. The repository connection will take care about getting all these contents that we want to migrate in the target repository. So we just need to set a name. Anyway, we can also give a description, because if you have a lot of connectors, you need probably also a description. We have different connection type. As you can see here, we have just many connector types ready to use. So Documentum, SharePoint, we have Nuxeo, Google Drive, we have also HDFS. So we have a lot of connectors ready to use. We have chosen here the CMIS. So actually, we are configuring our, generic CMIS repository where we would like to, get contents. So here we are. We have the new, repository connection correctly configured in the manifold. So actually, we are going to configure the output connector. So this is the new repository, the new empty repository that we have ready to receive our content. So here we have to set our name for ManifoldCF. This is a key for the ManifoldCF database to store all the transactions that are executed during the crawling process. Now we are configuring the target repository. So we have to set 8080 because it is the correct port for our current Alfresco running on the laptop. And we have to set the target folder just with a CMIS query. We need to select the correct CMIS folder. And we can see that the connection is working. So the manifold will take care about checking the connection. You can understand immediately if some settings are wrong. And now we only need to configure a new job. So the job is the component that can bind the repository connection for getting contents and the output connector for drop all these contents in the new repository. We can give a name of this job, so we don't have a lot of fantasy. Just CMIS, source repo as a repository connection, and the CMIS target repo. So we have two different repositories, and we would like to migrate from the source to the target. We have to set the CMIS query, because in the repository connection, we want to crawl only one folder that contains all the tree that we want to migrate. So in this way, we are crawling the source repo. That is exactly the digital assets management repository that we want to migrate. That's it. So actually, we have correctly configured a new job. And we now execute this job. And as you can see, the job is just starting up. So after some seconds, the crawler is starting to do the job and starting to, as you can see, to crawl contents. So it just to fetch. The fetching phase is started. And actually, we have a lot of content ready to be processed. So actually, the problem is that my laptop is not a server, so and this operation takes some time. And actually, as you can see, the target repository has correctly, dropped some contents during the crawling. Let's see. And Alfresco now is generating new thumbnails. So as you can see, you can see all the flyers for all the video games of your fantastic repository. And as you can see now, you can see that these contents are just created now. So in the properties for each content. So thumbnails are correctly generated. So the content is real, just migrated. And we will see that created now. We will see that for each MIME type, we will have correct binary and correct properties also. Actually, this connector doesn't take care about all the properties, because the CMIS output connector can be used also with different repository connector, not only CMIS. So we are working on this metadata mapping, because you probably want also to change the schema or your content model if you want when you migrate. So this is another task that we want to work on. These are PDF files, so another different asset. And as you can see, Manifold has corrected migrated all. So these assets are just migrated, and Alfresco has just created the new web preview for our PDF files. And 1942, a great video game. Another MIME type, another type of content are screenshots. And here we have other fantastic screenshots from our main resources datasets. And we have also soundtracks and videos. Again, soundtracks. Just some seconds, just to check that these are real resources that are correctly processed by Alfresco. So as you can see, we have the player. We don't have the audio, but just to check that the MIME type is correct. And we finally can check the videos that we could migrate on our Alfresco. So the binary migrated. And we can also access the preview of this content just using Manifold. So you don't need to write code. So this is just an initial phase of this content migration feature of Manifold. And now with Luis, so we'll show you other output connectors that could be interesting for you.
Thank you. So the concept of the bulk file system import connector, output connector, sorry, came because my experience from working with customers and migrating content onto the repository, I find that ingesting content that already exists inside the source, inside the content store, so bulk file system import per se, is the quickest way to ingest content, really, because we don't need to stream the binary data. The binary data exists already in the repository. So when Alfresco imports this content, it only needs to create the references in the database pointing to the binary files that are already in the content store. And for that reason, and most of the times, we use the bulk file system importer, either the embedded one on our Alfresco Enterprise or the one that is a community-based from Peter Monks. It basically creates binary files in a shadow metadata file that contains the metadata for this object that will be binded to Alfresco. So this output connector, basically it crawls from all the different input connectors and it writes down either to a file system or to S3 or even via FTP. What's going on with this? Yeah, do it. Okay, let me show you the. So currently we can write via this output connector either to a local file system. Imagine that Manifold is running on a server that has Alfresco, and you can point this local file system to inside the content store, so it will crawl and write the contents and the metadata files directly inside the content store, so you can bulk import them. We can also write into a remote FTP, and this can be a server, Alfresco server that is running remotely, but we are writing directly into the content store via FTP, or we can write into an S3 bucket, imagining that we have Alfresco running on AWS cloud, and that the bulk importer can do in-place import via S3. This is an ongoing effort to change the bulk importer to allow for ingestion of contents inside an S3 bucket. I am working on this. It will be soon available. But those are the three options. And the only thing we need to configure is the path. So where do we want to write the contents or to crawl the contents into? So let's see a small demo on how all this works. So here I'm configuring the bulk file system import output connection. See the parameters. I'm going to configure the local file system, and I'm going to configure a local path, in this case on my computer. I run all this demo in my local computer. As you can see, the connection is working, and the output connection has been created. So now I have one job, and this job will basically crawl. I'm creating a new job that will crawl from a file system location where I have sample files, and it will create those files, those binary files and metadata in the bulk file system importer format. So here I'm going to go back because I need to add the target in the job. So I'm going to edit the job and add the target where I want to write my contents to. So, and after this, I save, and I'm going to execute the job. As you can see, there are some rules and some filtering that you can apply when you're crawling. In this case, I'm including everything that it finds on that folder. So I'm going to start the job, and starting the job, we will see that we will have some activity. If you look at the column where it says active, you'll see one. So, and if we go to the file system, we see on this folder that I've configured as the output from my connector, on demo data, we can see the games manual were created. So both the binary files and the shadow metadata files were created. And I'm going to, so this is real PDF data, and I'm going to open one of the shadow metadata files so that I can see I'm going to do a basic mapping so that it can prove that this was crawled by Manifold. So I'm including here the contributor of the content, and I'm including two aspects. So in these aspects, I'm filling a couple of attributes so that we can see that those were generated by Manifold. So we can use the bulk importer to import this content. So I've moved this inside the content store. I didn't write it directly to inside the content store, but I moved it to the content store, and I configured the bulk import tool just to import everything into guest home, because I don't want to import into a site. So the importing, as you can see, is really, really quick. When we're talking about a couple of hundreds of files, not much, but it's like 1 second or so, and we have all our contents inside guest home, and these contents have the metadata that we configured when we were crawled. So we can see the title of the document. It was crawled by Manifold Input Connectors. And if we click all properties, it will take a bit because my computer was burning. It was running a lot of things. But anyway, 1 or 2 seconds, we will see the whole properties. And you get to see that contributor part that I showed you on the metadata shadow file is here. So the content was created with the correct metadata. The other type of, can you pause the video, please? Yeah, so this is also important. It's already published an Alfresco web script connector on Manifold. It was done by a former colleague, Mauricio Pilito. And it contains a set of web scripts that you can deploy on top of your repository that will allow Manifold to crawl from an Alfresco source. So this can be, it's an existing, committed, available input connector for Manifold based on Alfresco web scripts that you need to have deployed into your Alfresco if you want to crawl this Alfresco using the web script connector. Continue. So, and all we have to configure is the protocol, the server, the port, and of course, the credentials. As we can see, the connection is working, meaning I can crawl this repository using the web script connector. In this example, I'm crawling the full repository. I'm not applying any filters, but you can apply filters by site, just crawl the site, specific MIME types, aspects, and so forth. In this case, my repository was relatively empty, so I decided to crawl everything. So again, I need to create a job, then start this job that is, in this case, using the input connector that is a web script input connector, and output connector is the bulk file system output connector again. As you can see, we refresh, we see some activity, and if we go back to the file system, as you can see here, this was being processed by the web script connector. I wanted to show you this, and as you can see here on the output, we have files that came from my repository that has only a couple of files. Can you stop the video, please? And because we are crawling from Alfresco, and the output connector is intelligent enough to know and identify what am I crawling to, it detects it's from Alfresco. And in Alfresco, we have the site paradigm. When we are exporting sites, it's not exporting nodes and metadata. There's more complexity when we talk about sites. There's dashboards, there's user memberships, there's roles. And for that reason, I've configured the output connector to do a call to the Alfresco API that exports the whole site as a zip file, and inside it contains the contents, the members, the groups, the memberships, and every relationship between the contents of a site that can subsequently be imported by Alfresco also via a tool or an API. Continue. So Yeah, that's the part. I've only exported, this was the only site that was found on this repository. It's actually bootstrapped when you install Alfresco, so if you had more sites, they will be exported there. So right now I'm going to show you incremental crawling. So I'm going to add 2 new files to my repository, okay? Remember, we had 6 files before, and I add 2 new files, and I'm going to execute another crawling so that I can show you that this is really incremental, and it's only going to crawl the delta. So I execute the job again, and if we go back to the file system, you see those 2 new files were created, and you can see the date that they were created, 7 minutes after the first crawling. So this means the incremental crawling works really well, and it only works with the delta of content. The third scenario I want to show you is using the CMIS input connector, okay? And the output connector is my connector, again, the bulk file system output connector. So via CMIS, okay, this Alfresco via CMIS to bulk file system import. You configure the CMIS query, so where do you want to crawl from? And then when you execute, this is for you to see the content that we will crawl, okay? And we need to finish. So when we start the job, you will see that we will be crawling from guest home, and now my output is an empty folder. And when you start the job, you will see the output folder with only the contents of the guest home that was, I think, 8 files that we have there, using, in this case, the CMIS input connector. So the job has run. Let's open the output. You see, on my output, I have only the files that I had on the folder that I've configured my CMIS input connector to migrate. And this is already ready for bulk imported. And that is my demo. I'm passing to Piergiorgio.
And that's it. Just last words. This is just our working, work project. So the content migration feature is not included actually in the stable release of Manifold. But if you want to contribute, we have a roadmap. We would like to adopt also the cloud services APIs for storage and other useful capabilities. So if you want to, contribute in this project, please join us. Send us an email, and you will be welcome to this project for helping the community to do great things in a better way. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We have every time for some questions or not?
I think we are.
No, we don't have.
Anyway, you can, if there's some questions or clarifications, you can reach us outside anywhere. We are social people, so.
Yeah, we are Latin, so.
Yeah, just reach out to us.
Thank you.
Pay us a beer, and we'll tell you all about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.